but then we stood on top on the 23rd of May 2019, and from that point on, your entire life changes, your perspective on the world, and what you see as like a problem changes, and just like for me, so there's like two things to it. The first is it's the most extraordinarily beautiful thing you can ever see in your entire life, and then the second bit is you realise that we are absolutely tiny, insignificant in this humongous planet.
Legend, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, mate?
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. I don't normally do an intro for anyone, but I feel I need to today because I've got a lot of admiration for what you do, what you've achieved, and getting to know you has given me a lot more respect for you from the dips, from doing the talk, and just touching base with you. So let's get into it. So, all right, I am generally honoured to sit across from today's guest. Major Gethin Davies is a serving officer in the Royal Gurkha Rifles, one of the most respected and demanding roles in the British Army. He spent his career leading soldiers in some of the toughest environments, making high-stake decisions that most of us can't even imagine. On top of that, he's climbed Mount Everest twice, not just for the thrill, but to lead and represent the army at the very top level. That takes a level of mindset, preparation, and a grit that I have huge respect for. What stands out to me, though, beyond the achievements, is the way he leads, calm under pressure, humble in attitude, but razor sharp when it comes to purpose. So today's not about glory stories, it's about learning from someone who's walked the walk, and I'm really grateful to have this conversation. How are you, brother?
Well, that was quite the intro. Yeah, thanks for that.
No worries, mate. It means a lot to me. Every interaction I've had with you know what's like real confidence to me? It's like you don't gloat. Like I remember I met you for a dip with you come down, and when I seen you, I was just like, you and Andy, I was just like, what's happening, mate? All right? And you're like, hi, mate, all right? And it was just a down to earth bloke, really easygoing, curious, inquisitive, and I was like, and then when Andy mentioned a little bit what you've done, I was like, hang the fuck on. How could he just be so chilled? And that's a credit to you, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thanks. I don't really like putting it out there. I think we do, you only join the army because you want to. You wouldn't get through the training if you were kind of doing it for other people. And when it comes to the climbing, it's pretty much the same. I think it's now dominated by like social media.
Yeah.
But if you're on Everest and your sole purpose of being there is to get Instagram photos, then you're in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think humility is key. If you're a real leader, you have to be able to understand your people and walk in their shoes.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you kind of have to be prepared to do anything that you'd ask other people to do. So I would be upset, I think, if people thought, oh, he's a bit cocky or he's cocksure, because that's kind of not how we are as South Walians as well. I think it's a very Welsh thing to be humble. And anyway, there's still lots to achieve. We've scratched the surface,
Scratched the surface. I think, like you said, you're very humble. And it is a definite Welsh thing. I've noticed that with a lot of things. We don't like to really celebrate our success. I don't know if it's like a small country mentality. But with you, even like just speaking out there earlier, your background, you've got a bit of a cycling background as well.
Yeah.
That was way before you started getting into the military, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Port Talbot, in fact in Carmarthen, just north of Port Talbot. Went to school in Port Talbot, Dufferin Comprehensive School. It's not there anymore. And I started cycling mainly because the Avon Valleys, it's the mecca of mountain biking now. But in the mid-90s, it was new. I mean, nobody even had suspension. But my house backed basically onto the trails.
Yeah.
So we got involved in that. And I just decided that it was the kind of like adventure sports were were where I wanted to be. My dad had been like a high-level rugby player, coached our team. He was like, sort of achieved a load in rugby. And I think at first he was a bit disappointed that his son didn't really want to do that, and he'd just rather go off on his bike instead. But then, cycling progressed all the way through the teens, through national championships, rising overseas, getting sponsored, doing all of that cool stuff, all before it's become this like extraordinary, unbelievable, massive sport. So I think the foundations for kind of like endurance, sacrifice, being able to sort of look after yourself and things were built through that in like the safe space of like 4 or 5 kilometers outside the back gate.
Wow. It's pretty good to have that on your doorstep, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It sets you up for success, but you still got to do the work and get yourself there. You touched on it a little bit outside. You had a really nasty injury that kind of shifted your whole goal, essentially, with the cycling, would you say?
Yeah, I think like cycling was going well. Loved being in that sport, but it was early doors in like a technology sense. There was no, there were no Zoom calls for team training. The ability to do static training was just a bike on a static turbo trainer in your garage. There was no Zwift. The only metric you had on your handlebar was just the speedo. You didn't know the power was going through. And I had an injury in my teens that sort of knocked me. And I wonder if now the sort of support and the connected world that our youngsters live in, whether it would knock me as much if I went through it now. But I kind of shifted focus. I think I had a reality, or the reality dawned on me that I wasn't ever going to be anywhere near as good as I hoped I would be in cycling. And I did the sort of one of the classic ex-athlete things of thinking, well, I don't really want a real job, and if I can't make cycling a hobby or cycling a profession, then I'll just join the military and avoid working in an office for as long as I physically can.
That's a mad way to look at it, because you're going into something pretty tough anyway. Like, even though it might not be the corporate world, you've gone into the military world. I want to ask you something which people that might be getting into the military. What is something that you didn't expect when you joined that taught you a lot? And if you know what I mean, did I word that correct then?
Yeah, I think there's like 2 strands to it. So if we talk about like the humility and the sort of segment that we went down with South Walians in general, like my route into the military was through officer training. So I went to Sandhurst, commissioned as an officer, which is quite a big thing. Yeah. And it's quite a grown-up environment. I went straight from A-levels, so I didn't go to university. I was a real baby. I just passed my 19th birthday when I started training. And it was like a whole new world of experience. There were people there who had finished a master's degree in Oxford or Cambridge. They were really well-spoken. They had networks in the military. Their parents had served in the military. And for me, that was like a real sort of intellectual workup. The physical side of stuff was fine. You were fit before, you got fitter through the training, and you performed really well. But for me, I found that you had to mature really quickly, all because at the end state, when you're sort of 20, you take over your first platoon, and on day 1, sat there, you get a whole raft of issues come in, and you think, oh shit, I'm in charge.
Yeah.
And you just grow up really quick. But insofar as like people thinking about joining the military and how they would kind of prepare for it, it's just basics. There's nothing fancy needed. You don't need a personal trainer. You don't need to do anything extraordinary. It's all about legs and lungs for me, I think. So if you can run fast and you're fit overall, basic exercises, press-ups, sit-ups, and you can do 1.5 miles in sort of sub 9 minutes, you'll be absolutely fine.
Okay.
So I would avoid going crazy, lifting heavy, doing anything fancy, and just sort of train like an old school boxer. I think that's the best.
Old school boxer,
yeah.
I like that. You just said though you went straight into becoming an officer. Is that's not the normal? That's a big jump, right?
So I suppose it is normal. Where it maybe isn't normal, and maybe sort of touch upon one of my frustrations is, I went to a comprehensive school in Port Talbot, and I sat down one day with the careers advisor, and she said, "Oh, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Oh, I want to be an officer in the armed forces." I was kind of undecided at that point, and it's a bit like the sort of the comedy sketch where Mickey Flanagan is talking about that he wants to like drive vans, and she sort of turned around to me and she said, "No." She was like, "This is you go to a comprehensive school in Port Talbot. We produce soldiers. We don't really produce officers. I don't have any leaflets to be an officer," and it's quite self-deprecating. Self-deprecating as an organisation to sort of stifle or look to stifle youngsters in being able to get over that line. Now, of course, you did need to sort of do a bit of preparation and stuff for it, but it's super achievable. And of course, when you come from a normal background, the greatest skill that you have when then faced with a platoon of soldiers thereafter is you kind of understand where they come from, what struggles they go through, maybe what family background they have, and frankly, the fact that you've stood on a council estate before can be worlds apart from some people who join the army as an officer. But I think the key change within all of that, the confidence to go and become an officer, was because at the time I was going to cadets on the side, so outside of school. And I had support through cadets from like amazing volunteer adults who just guided, helped prepare for interviews. You gained the kind of military exposure and experience. So school was kind of like one chunk, but in reality, it was all of the other component parts, the sport, cadets. Before cadets, scouts and cubs. I know it's cool now. It was not cool back then. But it's like these foundational strands, and then to top it off, like, to be fair, I have like two wonderful parents who just set like baseline things for us. They were like, "Look, you can do whatever you want, but if you're going to try taekwondo, for instance, then you stick it for 6 weeks, and after 6 weeks, then you can make a decision as to whether you go back or continue, or sort of quit or continue." So, all said and done, it was a great escape from Port Talbot.
I was going to say, Port Talbot's an eye opener anyway.
I love Port Talbot. It's like deep in my heart. I think South Wales has struggled since like major industry has declined, but I mean there's so few towns on the planet that produce the people that Port Talbot do, whether that's kind of the sulphur that was in the air coming out of the blast furnaces when we were in the school playground, but it's a special place in my heart. Of course it is.
Good. Love that, man. Love that. And for you then, like, was it like you had a set out goal where you wanted to go then once joining the military, or was it like, I'm just going to see where this venture's on?
Yeah, so I sort of scuppered around with a couple of ideas at the start, and I think, so the best way of understanding Sandhurst is, so Sandhurst is a year long.
Okay.
You start day one, week one, you turn up in a suit, mum drops you off with an ironing board, they call it ironing board Sunday, and there's just these terrifying colour sergeants sort of stood everywhere. And you get sorted into your platoons, and then over the next sort of 12 months, really your regimental home or your place in the military finds you. And I remember it was like 5 weeks into Sandhurst, and I was laying next to this bloke in a shell scrape, which is just, if you can imagine, sort of like we dug down like 12 inches, and we were in our sleeping bags, laying in the middle of this forest, and he was like, I'm having second thoughts about joining the infantry. And I was like, why? Like, this is a good little exercise. And he was like, dude, this is the first night in my life I've ever spent outside. And so they say that, like, it's a bit like Hogwarts, where the sorting hat will get you. For me, I like thrived in the field. I love being outside and doing all the physical stuff. And I sort of couldn't think of anything better than going into the infantry and looking after infantry soldiers. And you know, it was a double whammy, really, because I was probably a little bit too stupid to join the engineers or something. But yeah, I've had a great time.
Good, mate. Good. What's up, guys? This podcast is brought to you by UTest. UTest provides clinically accurate, rapid home testing kits for a variety of medical conditions and deficiencies. Designed for convenience, these tests deliver results in just 5 minutes, eliminating the need to wait days or weeks for lab results. The range includes tests for prostate PSA levels, bowel cancer screening, onset menopause to fertility, and more. All tests are available with the next day delivery at www.utest.co.uk. Use the code 0010 for 10% off your order. Now, let's go back to the episode. Now, you love your climbing, right? Is that a path that kind of came available with the military, or was that something you did on the side and then kind of intertwined it? Because you climbed Everest. You've done loads of climbing, by the way, but you climbed Everest the first time in 2019.
Yeah.
Now, prior to that, you've done a lot of other climbs, but how did they kind of intertwine with each other?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. So the first time I went to Nepal was in 2010, and it was during a little bit of like a difficult time in my life, and I had an opportunity to go. Now, before that, with family, with cadets and stuff, done loads of outdoor stuff in the UK, skied in the Alps and climbed in the Alps, and I kind of thought to myself, like, if you're obsessed with mountains, you've got to go to the Himalayas. There is nothing on the planet that looks like the Himalayas. And I thought, right, I need to get over myself a little bit. I was going through a bit of a rough patch. So I headed off to Nepal on my own as a youngster. And the plane sort of screeched to a halt in Lukla, which is, I think people like will coin it the world's most dangerous airport. It's the famous kind of airport gateway to the Himalayas. And from that moment, I was like totally hooked.
Really?
Because it wasn't just the terrain, but it was the people, and of course, you know, the regiment I serve in the army. All of our soldiers are from Nepal, not necessarily all from the mountainous region, but typically a bit like Wales, really. Nepal has communities that are as welcoming, and you know, people are just beautiful. So I was totally hooked, and about sort of 10 days later, I climbed my first 6,000 meter peak. So to put that into context, you know, Snowdon's just over 1,000 meters.
Wow.
So vertically 6 times the height of Snowdon, and in Nepal terms, that's like a baby. That is, you know, that's your entry level peak. And I just saw this totally new perspective on the world. I loved the fact that you could kind of escape the hustle and bustle and noise of the UK. And yeah, to answer your question, then thereafter, the military is amazing at supporting athletes, whether it be in sport or in adventurous training, climbing, skydiving, all of that kind of stuff. And then, you know, in the sort of decade and a half that followed, I then went back to Nepal, I think now 16 or 17 times on expedition, finding new peaks. We went through a couple of year project of trying to like climb unclimbed peaks up on the sort of Tibetan border between Nepal and Tibet. Essentially, you know, that interim period was trying to like stand where no one had ever stood before. And mainly because I kind of thought that, okay, Everest is a goal, but maybe like financially unobtainable. It is extraordinarily expensive to climb Everest. So I spent the best part of the first decade climbing in Nepal, kind of always looking at Everest and thinking, wouldn't it be great? And then thinking to myself, shit, where am I going to find the money? And after the first 8,000 meter expedition I went on, so I suppose for context for people listening, there are 14 mountains on the planet above 8,000 meters, most of which are in Nepal, a few in Pakistan, and in Tibet. I'd done Manaslu, which is the 8th highest mountain in the world, and I felt really strong. I was like, I don't know whether it's the cycling background, maybe it's the sort of the Welsh background, but for some reason I feel like really strong up here, where, you know, genetically you and I should not be good up there. You know, we are sea level dwellers. We are not used to altitude. Our fingers aren't good enough in the cold, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of that expedition, or certainly within sort of 12 months after that expedition, somebody gave me a call, a pal of mine from the climbing world, and he was like, dude, do you want to come on Everest? We're going in like 2.5 months. And I was like, shit. How do I, one, pay for this, and two, get time off work and go? My boss at the time was like super supportive, and he was like, look, you can have the time off. The army allows stuff like that, which is insane. And I emptied all of my savings. I kind of looked at through this prism of, well, I've got a decent contract, so there's going to be money coming in at the other side as long as I survive. And if I don't survive, maybe I'll be on some kind of compensation scheme. But I'd been saving the money for a deposit on a house, and I was really like emotively tied to sort of deciding whether to spend it or not. And it kind of dawned on me at one point. I was like, you know, no one's ever said to, like, or maybe they would in 2025, but no one's ever said to their mum and dad, like, Mum, how old are you when you paid off your mortgage? Or, you know, or what rate did you have, and all that boring nonsense. And I know it's a fact that we need to sort of get on, but I was like, let's spend this.
Yeah.
I can think about like the property after. So I headed off in 2019, and we did it on an absolute shoestring. And most of the expedition was like a total disaster. We climbed too soon in the season. We did too many rotations on the mountain, and we can kind of get into the bones of Everest in a bit. But then we stood on top on the 23rd of May 2019, and from that point on, your entire life changes. Your perspective on the world, and what you see as like a problem changes. And just like for me, so there's like two things to it. The first is it's the most extraordinarily beautiful thing you can ever see in your entire life. And then the second bit is you realize that we are absolutely tiny, insignificant in this humongous planet. And I noticed when I got home that obviously nothing changed. I went to work, and people said, like, by like day 2 of being back, they were like, if you tell us about Everest again, like, you're getting the drinks in. Like, you've got to stop talking about Everest. But I'd noticed like my ability to see which problems needed action in, and which was just, what parts were just white noise, was way better.
So effective then.
Yeah, efficient. I think so. Yeah, I think you know, we all have stresses and struggles, but having the ability to think, right, well, actually, that's a serious problem. I need to get on to that. And, you know, the fact that I've got this small bill to pay, or I'm not quite going to be able to pay that in full this month or whatever. Okay, that's like, it's actionable, but you don't need like emotional stress from it. So it kind of like calms you down as a human. The problem with Everest is, of course, once you've climbed Everest, like, what do you do next? Yeah. And so I'm terrible for it, where I get back from an expedition, and for the best part of a week after, I'm like, Life's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm super chilled. All I want to do is get a coffee and sit, sort of looking out over a view. And then sort of 5 days later, I'm like, right, where are we going next?
Would you say you're like a bit of an adrenaline junkie then?
Yeah, I think so.
Because it's like the cycling, obviously going into military, they're all high end, high energy, high adrenaline. And then climbing is no joke.
Yeah.
There's got to be something there, but then I don't think it's a bad thing though. I think it's a good thing,
Yeah, I think so. I think I've spent way too much time in this, what people call like type 2 fun, where like type 2 fun is fun after the event.
Yeah.
And Everest is a bit like that. In fact, it's like, I don't know if there is a type 3, but it's basically like fun about 6 weeks after the event when your toes are finally warmed back up and you can feel them again. But yeah, like definitely an adrenaline junkie, but I think the principle is like it's far more pure than that. So for me, we've spoken about Port Albert, but like mum and dad, they like came from humble beginnings. I did like the ancestry back on the entire family, and in reality, for about 6 generations, no one, or certainly no men in the family, had done anything but be underground. And underground 6 days a week. Day off for Christmas Day in the pits across South Wales, generation after generation. Going down 12, 13 years old, coming back up, retiring, dying soon of something related to coal dust or being in the mine. And the thing that's always like emotively kind of underpinned my ambition is a realization that it's only because of their hard graft that the family sort of succeeded, and then you were given these opportunities. And I kind of use it as a bit of a driving force, which I think, for generations, the people in, the lineage of the family, they weren't able to do this stuff. And I come from a normal background, and it's one of my sort of like, I don't know if it's frustration, but it's something that I wish more of our youngsters have, which is just like a realization that if you want something hard enough in 2025, you can get it. Whereas if you wanted something hard enough 150 years ago, you weren't getting it. You were in that pit. You weren't, you could never break that sort of glass ceiling. And so, yeah, I carry that with me because, I think, why not?
Yeah, why not? It's so true what you just said then, though. I don't want to derail, but like, imagine our people now had the resilience that we had three generations ago. That resilience in today's society with the opportunities here, like them people would be smashing it,
Yeah, yeah.
I think, like you just said, I think being successful now, depending what is your successful, it's there for you if you want to take it. But if you're willing to roll your sleeves up and do the work as well, though.
Yeah.
I want to go back to what you just said though, regarding Everest. How many days are you on Everest?
So it depends, but for an average expedition, it's about a month and a half. And most of that is obviously spent low down in base camp, sort of getting ready to do a training rotation, or then go for the summit push. So to sort of break it down, the only way that a mere mortal like you and I can climb Everest is to acclimatise to the mountain and then sort of stalk the mountain on your way up and eventually go for a summit push. So you think to get to base camp, best part of 10 days. Base camp's at 5,500 meters and is high. So you get to base camp, rest there, get to the point where you can walk to the loo and not be like totally out of breath. And it takes a couple of days, and then thereafter you start scoping weather windows on the mountain. So the mountain, it's a pretty simple climb from the south side, so from Nepal's side. It's not particularly technical, but it's a long stretch. It's kilometre after kilometre, sort of scrambling up initially through the icefall, and then you get into this enormous central valley before then going higher. Certainly above 7,000 metres is when it really starts to bite. So all of that takes time, and it takes time because otherwise we wouldn't physically be able to do it. You need to let your red blood cells increase. you need to sort of get into a routine, into a rhythm, and then get ready for the point where the weather lifts. And what I mean by that is essentially at the top of Everest, it's 8,848 meters. It is up in the jet stream, super high or super fast, powerful winds that sort of circle the planet. And they only lift twice a year in the Himalayas. They lift briefly in the autumn and briefly in the spring. And typically that happens mid-May, or sort of early to mid-May for about 2 weeks. And so you get prepped then, so that when you launch, that the conditions are as good as they can be on the mountain, because it is a pretty wild place. And without extra wind, on summit day, you could be expecting minus 32 without wind, so you add wind chill on top, and you realize why it's so easy to lose the fingers sometimes.
That's mad.
Yeah.
So what were the winds like when you were up there? Did they get?
Yeah, I mean, so if I use this year as an example, or last year as an example, so went back in 2024, having summited in 2019. Initially, I didn't really want to go back.
Why?
Because I think you'd done it for you once, and so I was quite content in like personal achievement. But then an opportunity came around to take the army team and lead them on the mountain, or develop them all the way to the point of getting there and then lead them on the mountain. And that became like a 3-year love affair of trying to raise the funds, find the team members, train them, prepare them, get out to Nepal and get on with it. And we had this like unbelievably successful sort of trajectory into it. So the boys had trained really hard in the UK. We had the best kit. They had the best support around them. We got to the mountain. No one was like really sick. It was like your dream expedition all the way through. And we were quite high on the mountain doing like a training rotation early in May last year. And I was like scanning through all the weather apps, and I was getting stuff sent from the UK. And I sort of saw this gap in weather, and I was like, holy shit, if we go now, we're going to avoid everyone. Like, the mountain is empty. Most people had already acclimatized and disappeared off into the lower valley. And so we went for it. And we climbed, so we left a camp called Camp 2. Camp 2 then goes up to this enormous ice wall called the Lhotse Face. So it's not like insanely steep. It's like best part of 45 to 50 degrees for the best part of a vertical kilometre. So the exposure is pretty tasty. Don't drop a Mars bar, because it's gone. And it's potentially going to hit somebody down there like 120 miles an hour.
They'll know about it, that's for sure.
Yeah, and we got all the way to Camp 4, and Camp 4 is like it's the highest campsite on planet Earth. It's 8,000 meters. Wow. It's situated on a saddle, so in between two enormous mountains, Everest here and Lhotse here. And the boys were still doing really well, and it was like, there was something eking at me to say, like, why is this like without any form of issue? And that carried on. And we got all the way up to Everest's south summit, which is about 200 meters below the summit at first light on this the most beautiful morning over the Himalayas. And then just boom, like the wind changed. The radios crackled to life. The blokes in base camp were like shouting down the radios saying the forecasters got it wrong. The winds were picking up. They were going to be 90 miles an hour within like 2 hours. And I was like, well, we're turning around. Like, the team, who by this point we'd all been together for over a year. We trained together. We knew each other inside out. And what we'd done before getting there is war gamed all of like the worst or best scenarios to everything. So everything from like, what happens if one of us dies, or what happens if I die as the expedition leader? Like, what are your actions thereafter? Who takes over? How do you manage it? Where do you go? So when I said we're turning around, they were like, yeah, fine. they understood that you'd made a decision that was based off hard fact, that you kind of knew that we didn't have enough time to get to the summit and back, and that we're going to have to turn around. And it hit home for the blokes on the way down, because we passed 2 other climbers going up, and I said, look, listen to my radio, like, don't go any further, like, the weather's changing. At this point, the winds were essentially swirling around us and creating almost like miniature, like, snow tornadoes is probably the best way of saying it on the mountain. And we descended all the way down, all the way to base camp, and with a realization and that kind of like sinking feeling inside, where I was thinking to myself, that's it, like, we fucked it, like, we're not going back up. And I've got to explain to everyone in the UK how their investment hasn't paid off. I've got to deal with these boys here who, unlike me, they don't have the privilege of having summited before. Got to console them and stuff. And on the way down, I was like, nah, like, we're going to find a way and go again. But what brought it home in the sort of like aftermath of the decision before we went back again was, I spoke to the team, and I discovered overnight that the 2 climbers that we passed and that we tried to turn around had both passed away on the mountain. So they died on that day. So the kind of reality of decision making, or the seriousness of the decisions you were making, sort of kicked in. And we sat down in base camp, and we had like an open forum discussion, like, every man equal. Do you want to go again? Do you have the energy? Do you have it in your heart? Do you have it in your head? No one here is going to judge you. You've all already like achieved like an extraordinary feat. And the vast majority of the team were like, yeah, I need some rest, but like, I'll go again. And 2 team members, and I think they're like the most amazing people, decided they didn't want to. They were like so content in what they'd achieved that they didn't feel a pressure to sort of go all the way back up to seek that extra 200 meters to the top. And I had like I have still total respect and admiration for the ability to be like comfortable, like paddle your own canoe and be comfortable with your own achievements. I was in a bit of like a difficult situation, wasn't I? Because I was the expedition leader, and I was like, shit, I need to go back up there because all of these want to go.
How many was there?
So the team was 7 strong, like unbelievably strong humans, but quite young. Like our youngest was 21. Wow. 21 years old on Everest is a big deal. And we went again, and the mountain was busy, so we were like, how do we avoid all of these like commercial crowds, like keep a low profile and just avoid being in dangerous situations because there's other people there? So I was like, right boys, we're climbing this in the night. We're going to do every stint between camps. We're going to do it at night, which is 1, really safe. 2, you don't overheat in your enormous down suit, and you can imagine the kit that you've got on. And 3, no one else is really moving. So we were almost at like the summit before the boys had really climbed anywhere near in daylight for the last 4 days. And they'd sweltered all day in their tents, because it's a really weird thing with it's the same in the Arctic as like the Himalayas, where the sun is so strong, so you can be in a tent in the middle of the day on Everest at like 7,500 meters, on top of your sleeping bag, in your pants, sweating, just because of the ability or the power of the sun. And the second time we had a really smooth summit. We summited like too early. We got to the summit, it was pitch black, And I was like, when is the sun going to come up? These are going to be the worst summit photos ever. And my lead climber, who was, a real dear friend of mine, he was about 50 meters ahead on summit day, and the team was spread in between. And 50 meters at 8,800 meters is like 10-minute walk. It is excruciating. You get to the point there where it's like 2 steps, 5 breaths, 2 steps, 5 breaths.
Really?
And it's quite frustrating. Yeah.
That's because you know your ability on normal land. And you're like, this is what it's taken me. Because 200 meters doesn't seem a massive. Obviously, what you're talking about is crazy. But if I put, that's 2 rugby fields.
Yeah.
On a flat line, obviously. But then all the other constraints on top of it, that must be crazy,
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you've got your Garmin going,
what's your heart rate sitting at?
It's quite high, actually, when you're working. You're sort of like easily into 160s, easily. But it's the lack of oxygen, and your body really sort of struggles with it. And it affects people in different ways, It increases the chances of getting cold because, of course, it's not pumping blood or enough blood around the body to feed your extremities. You are totally breathless the entire time. Any form of like dynamic movement. So if you get to like a little ice ledge or you have to haul yourself over something, then at the top of it is the same feeling of finishing like a really intense race. That sort of 200 beats a minute blasting. Wow. And Sam was sat on the summit for the best part of like 10 minutes waiting for, I was at the back and then the team members in between. And obviously we've been on this journey for 2 years. And I remember, like, I'm quite emotional when it comes to stuff like this. And for some reason, on the first summit of Everest in 2019, I started crying as I was walking to the summit. I don't really, I have emotion to it, but I don't ever really like overtly do it. And it happened again. And I was thinking, this is really strange. And, of course, it holds a special place in my heart. And so, of course, I'm sort of slightly sobbing away into my mask and goggles as I'm approaching Sam, who's now been sat on the summit for 10 minutes. And I was thinking, he's going to have something really inspiring to say. And he pulls his mask to one side and he sort of like calls me to get a bit closer. And I was thinking he's going to say like, this is the best moment of my life. And he just goes, mate, we need to get down. I'm fucking freezing.
I thought it was going to be some like inspirational moment. Get the fuck down.
So, we were lucky. We caught the sunrise, just like the first glimpses of sun, which was just like extraordinary, like an unbelievable sight. Because where the sun crests the horizon, as you stood on the summit of Everest, is essentially like on the Tibetan side, which means if you then look back into Nepal on this side, it sort of scars out this unbelievable shadow of Everest as the sun is coming up, and the size of Everest cuts the sort of sunlight and creates this unbelievable shadow, and it's like a really powerful thing to see. But of course, with daylight, especially for my team, because by this point they'd been climbing for 4 days, we really hadn't had much exposure because we're in the dark. And so, you can only see as far as your head torch can see. And of course, you just pretend there's nothing or there's no drop there. And we turned around on the summit morning and we started descending, and the sun by this point is high in the sky. And we were like, shit. Because the exposure on Everest, it like all of these big peaks, it's a powerful thing, for the mind. It's a powerful thing to get over, for full disclosure here. Like, I'm not a big fan of heights. Like, I don't think any real like mountain sports people, less like the totally insane, like it that much. You get used to it. But I think if you treated it as if it wasn't there, then you just kill yourself. So, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty sharp knife-edge ridge on Everest summit, and then thereafter, you've just got to get down as quick as you can. And we got to Camp 4, and I had this like amazing little bit of kit with me, this little InReach, which is like a GPS text messaging device. And one of my best pals from years out there, they own a helicopter company, and I texted him and I was like, Mingma, I was like, when is the soonest you can get a helicopter to base camp? Because my team have just climbed Everest basically twice in a week, and I want to get them to sea level, or certainly to like Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal, as quickly as possible. And he texted me back, and I still got like a screenshot, and he was like, hey bro, we can do 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. And at this point I'm thinking like, oh, that's 18 hours to get from basically 8,000 meters to 5,500 meters through 3 camps on the way down, and the blokes have spent all night climbing. Everest summit rotation, you're basically moving for 90 hours. You know, there's no real rest. It's too high to sleep. And I said to the boys, I was like, right, if you can get to base camp by 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, there's a helicopter there, and it's going to get you out. And the speed that they went, they absolutely, so they gunned it down the mountain. And by this point, I mean, they weren't even like, I don't know what the sort of scientific definition of like when you hit the wall and then you hit the wall again, and you're so depleted there's nothing left, but the human body can keep going. They just kept going, and we came out of the icefall at like, it was like 6:45 a.m. And by this point I'm having like a total like panic. I was thinking, if we don't get on this helicopter, then I'm going to get like a 10 grand bill, and we're probably not going to get another one. And as we like crested over the last block of ice, I could literally just see the helicopter coming up the valley, and you could hear that like doof, 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 doof. And the speed that they went across base camp, we literally just like ran to our tent, grabbed our stuff, like, and left 0 there, got on the helicopter, and by that afternoon they were in like the sunshine in Kathmandu, rested up, and it was a pretty extraordinary kind of escape from Dodge. Yeah, it was good,
mate. That's unbelievable. I'm a bit lost for words on this, because just what a story, what an experience. And shout out to all those boys and women who did it. But mate, that takes a lot of bollocks from you as well. Like, you're in charge of this, and it could have gone tits up. Like, 2 people died.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
you've got to make that conscious decision, and they go, okay, well, we're gonna go back or not, and essentially on you. I'm thinking to myself right now, me and a couple of those speaking panel guys went up there and went to speak on mental resilience to the military, and went to ask, high pressure situations. You're the OG sitting there asking us the questions, mate, and I'm just gobsmacked. I really am, because I knew about the story, but I didn't know into what depth. And the fact that you went back up says a lot about you as a person, and the gang that did it. And no disrespect to the 2 that decided. That they take my hat off to those guys too, because that takes balls to do it, And but then to do it mentally, like the emotions that must be going through your body, like you're depleted, you're exhausted. There's a part of you that's mentally checked out as well, because you've got so far 200 meters off. That's that mental shift. And I'm just saying to myself, where do you find that energy to dig deep and do it?
Yes, it is tough. I think Everest, the tough. Well, I mean, it's tough because it's slow. So it's very methodical. It's quite a simple climb, but it's a lot of time on your own, albeit within a team, and I'll sort of describe why in a sec. Sort of mulling over your own thoughts. Yeah. So the higher you get on the mountain, or certainly if the weather gets worse, of course you could be walking with your team or climbing with your team, and less like sitting down for a rest stop. You know, communication is quite light. You know, people are out of breath, so they don't really want a conversation. And of course, you're all focused on the dangers, so you spend a lot of time in your head. And the hardest part of the route are the days on Everest where you start from a camp and you can physically see the next camp in front of you, like on the side of the mountain. And it's like a stone's throw away. And you think, oh yeah, that's going to take 8 hours. And you do 8 hours of monotonous movement to get to the camp. And of course, it never seems any closer. Your brain is sort of like fighting this battle as to like, don't focus on that, just focus on the floor. And, there's a reason the military people do well up there is because in between periods of like intensity, use combat operations is no different to sport or climbing, where, if you take your example from rugby, the intensity is the game. The monotonous background to it is the training, the rehabilitation, the nutrition, the not going out, the self-discipline, all of that kind of stuff. Combat operations, a specific moment of intensity, and then 6 weeks of sitting in a patrol base and nothing happens, and people are just on, like, preparing for something, but nothing happens. And then climbing is very much the same, where so you get these sparks of like the summit or like an intense part of the ice fall, but in between it's it's the ability to keep the body strong, to eat enough to keep the mind strong. It's it's all the basics, and these basics sort of overlay on everything. It's easy taking soldiers to Everest because they've been through the wall. They know what exhaustion feels like. They understand their bodies. And so I would always describe to them that, they didn't sit on the same sort of statistical metric that, every season, 2% of people or 3% of people who climb Everest die. And I was like, well, that's nonsense, because you're not in risk of making into that 2% because you understand yourself. We've got, you know how to deal with your nutrition, you know how to deal with the cold. Your drills when you go into your tent, that you take off your wet kit, put dry kit on. It's all these little things that shrink that chance right down to, the things we can't control. Whether it be an act of God, a natural disaster, whatever it is, those things you can't mitigate against, but everything else you can. And all of the controllables certainly for the team last year were, one, in play, and two, we'd exploited all of them. So their physical training before they went, their sort of preparation expeditions, all of that kind of stuff. So it meant the end product that was there, it didn't sit in this kind of like, 3% won't make it out of here alive. It was way down into the kind of like, unless the side of the mountain falls off, these blokes are going to be fine. They're going to survive and go home. And I think it's just through simple planning, really. But it is a tough place to be. And, I take my hat off to anyone who goes and climbs there. But the beauty of mountaineering is it's accessible to all. The downside of mountaineering is you could probably pay your way onto the mountain. If Everest was kicking off tomorrow and you really wanted to go and you had £100,000, I know operators who would take you to the mountain. So it gets a bad name because people don't go through that sort of apprenticeship that I was just describing.
Yeah. The grind.
Yeah.
People want that instant, like you said, that social media photo instead of the actual, the build up. Because it's a bit like a fight camp, isn't it, really? The hard work is, and training, to get deployed. The work is getting there. Then I'm not saying that's the fun part, but when you hear a fighter say, like, my 12-week fight camp was the hard part, the ring is the fun. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying Everest is the fun, but I mean, there's some hard stuff going on beforehand. I want to ask you as well, your relationship with those guys who did it with you, is it like a different bond?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the guy who was the second in command last year, overnight we became like best mates. And of course you have to like you kind of endure hell together, don't you? And I think it doesn't matter what scenario it is. When humans go through that together, you could go without seeing that person for 10 years and then you'd instantly pick it up again. And Sam and I, and we're close with all of the team, but Sam in particular was a great support for me, and a great sort of source of wisdom, advice, and perspective when we were trying to make these decisions. But at one point, we were at 6,500 meters, which is a pretty uncomfortable place to live, and we spent 14 days in a 2-man tent. Which gets pretty interesting. Yeah. And you kind of run out of conversation very quickly. Obviously, you've got no data on your phone, so there's no way of sort of getting outside entertainment, and you run out of levels on Angry Birds pretty quickly. And so you kind of really get to know each other, yeah. I was quite touched actually, because after the expedition, Sam revealed to me when we got back to Kathmandu, that his partner was expecting a baby, and he'd known throughout, and his ability to sort of, make his own decision. He didn't want to reveal it to the team, but he felt strong enough to carry on. Was pretty it was really just a wonderful moment at the end, and it resonated a lot with me because the exact same thing had happened to me in 2019, and I found out that I was going to be a dad, and it changes your risk dynamic. It doesn't necessarily stop you from doing it. You just think, okay, it's cool that your dad's climbed Everest. It's cool that your dad's done this. It's less cool that your dad is now an icicle on Everest. And so you just think about things a bit more. But I think harnessed in the right way, it makes you better at it, because you're not brash, or you don't think about the sort of second order consequences of things. So it was weird timing. So Sam's little one, mine now nearly 6-year-old, we're both sort of over the period of climbing Everest, and my little one now he's raring to go.
Class.
Yeah.
Amazing. What did you guys do? The first thing you did when you got back down to base, what did you guys do?
Well, we drank a beer. Yeah.
I was gonna say.
In fact, it was like a scene out of like an American movie where we got on the helicopter, and unbeknownst to me, so we got on the helicopter's taking off, it's going down the valley, it's like 250 feet, and the pilot is like thumping it down, and Sam turns to me and he kind of opens up his jacket, and he's just got like 2 cans of very warm lager, which at this point are like really pressurized. So he sort of cracks them open and basically covers all of us in beer, pilot included. We had the most disappointing warm flat beer. But yeah, got back, obviously like washed off the sort of 6 weeks of wear and tear. And we didn't like party particularly hard. It was just nice to like just relax. I think the body needs it. It needs to get like back into or close to ground level. I always show people whenever we do or whenever we speak about Everest, of course everyone wants to see like the summit photo. And so I always use like the comparison of like Instagram versus reality, and certainly like a photo from 2019 where like I'd gone to the mountain at 82 kilos. I stood in the hotel at the end of the expedition. I was like 68 kilos.
Wow.
You've got sick like time and time again. I was so dehydrated when I got back to Kathmandu that I had to get a drip, and I didn't realise when I sort of sent a photo back home and people noticed the drip in my arm. But yeah, it's sort of like it really sort of shaves away at your body. and your soul to a degree. And so then thereafter, you know, the work up, it needs to be sort of slow and quite structured. Knowing that from 2019, when we went last year, we took way more nutrition. We looked after ourselves a bit better. And of course, everyone's going to come back, you know, sort of fighting weight, having lost some kilos. You know, you just physically can't eat enough out there. But to get back and be able to get back into training was like a no-fail thing. To spend 6 months out of training would be like mission fail.
Yeah. You know, when we talk about things like doing hard things creates an easy life, doing easy things creates a hard life. Do you believe it created more, I like the term confidence or self-respect. I think people say, how do you build that? I think doing something like you did, that's like an internal respect for myself. Like, you've done something extremely hard. I think people crave that and want these things like confidence, or they want these things like instant validation or instant win. What did it teach you more about you as a person?
I think, like, for me, it was like pretty simple. It was an understanding that, you know, wherever you want to paddle your own canoe to, that's your own self-defined journey, and whatever that means, on your own sort of path to contentment, then that's totally respectable. And frankly, if people don't think that way, then, you know, they're not your friends. I don't know if what it taught me otherwise. Like, obviously, like, we only get, you know, in my eyes, we only get one life, and we're only this age once. And so why not get after stuff and do hard things that you will respect yourself for in later life, and you'll certainly look back on when you're not physically able to do those things again and think, like, I'm really glad I did that. And so the sort of method or methodology I've always used to kind of look at my own life is, I'm not like after anything in particular, but I'm just always wanting to stay at a point where if life ended now, that I would be content with what's happened before, and that I could lay there and think, well, I'm happy. And we've all got different ways and means of doing that. But I think it's a nice way of looking at it. Don't ever leave things wide open. I think the military is an interesting one, where the amount of people that I've met who will say, like, oh, I nearly joined the army. Or I nearly committed to rugby, or I nearly committed to this. And when you get to like my age of 35, you realise, like, you know, if you haven't done that by then, it ain't ever happening now.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, of course, anyone can build on stuff, but don't leave something that will become a regret thereafter.
Yeah, I love that. Now, for me, right, the commitment that you've done, joining the military, there's a fear of you putting your body on the line. And I know people say, well, that's the same as sports, but it's a lot different. Do you fear death?
That's a tough one, isn't it? No, I don't think so. No. I fear like a boring death. I fear like not being able to look after yourself anymore. No, I don't think it comes into the mindset, to be honest.
It's a good way to look. I like that, though. I like the fact of that. I think my biggest fear is not essentially dying. It's essentially not living up to my potential, not doing things I know I should do. Like, there's so many people I know, you probably know, they might be 50 now, but they've stopped living at 25. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, look at you, you've done 2 Everest, you've climbed multiple peaks, you've you've been deployed, you've been on tours, you've done cycling, you've done a lot of things, and you've experienced a lot. But then I would enjoy to sit in a bar with you and just talk for hours like we're doing right now, because I know you've got so much experience on life. Your perspective on life is far different to, you know, someone from my hometown or your hometown that's just stayed in the town. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. I think you said something off before the podcast about, you know, some people are happy to work that normal job, and some people like to be the boss. They like to keep growing.
Yeah.
And that's okay, whatever it is. But I think for me, it's like, you know, just even the thought when you just said, like, doing Everest, I'm like, I wonder if I could do that. You know, that come in my head. And that's, I don't know if it's the competitive side of me or something in me, but it's like, oh, I'd like to try that, you know? And
yeah. I think if I look back on, like, childhood and then, like, how I try and act as a dad is to like, never like, the greatest negative thing in the sort of society that we grew up in is people stifling other people's ambitions. There is nothing wrong with, you know, if you're content, you know, have a normal job, don't leave the village or town, whatever. That's like beautiful, contentment, lovely. But if you want to do it, it's not just the person that's going to do it. It's on that journey, the sort of years preceding it. It's whether it be teachers, coaches, you know, parents, friends, not stifling, like, the ambition in youngsters. That for me is like my biggest gripe.
I hate that.
Because you never know where, you know, sort of where people will circle around to. You know, I had an unbelievably brilliant time in cadets, but I remember there was one instructor when I was about 12, and we did our first ever kind of like weapons handling test, which is, you know, you sort of understanding how a rifle works and stuff. And one of the tests was that you had to fill a magazine, so you had to pick up the bullets, put them into the magazine, which is the sort of metal thing you attach on the bottom, and it was timed. And we were slow, we didn't know how to do it, you know, the sort of bullets were going in the wrong way, you know, it was all like basics. And he made us feel like this. It was like absolute zero. And it was about 15 years later, and I was already like quite a way into my army career, and I was thinking, like, this is really weird, because like, for us, of course, that's like, it's like a quarterly test. It's just an assurance tick in the box, like any sort of thing that an athlete has to do. Yep. Have you drug tested? Yep. Yeah, easy, done. And I was thinking, why do I have this weird feeling every time I do this? And I was like, it was because of him. It was that person as a youngster that took enough of a chink out of your armour that you felt it 15 years later. Now, fortunately, I didn't have many of those characters. I had loads of positive characters, you know, people who went above and beyond to give you those opportunities. But there were plenty of people within my peer group who had too many chinks taken out of their armour, and their ambition was stifled by others. And South Wales is like a real example of this. Yeah. Like, we have like wonderful people, like strong-minded, you know, sort of loving communities, like awesome people. But the kids need to realise that they can compete with the kids in England. You can, if you're a rugby team from Port Talbot and you go to a schoolboys championship and you've got all of the big name private schools there, like, okay, the parents may turn up in better cars and stuff, but they're no different.
Yeah,
you know.
I love that mentality. It's, I remember that when we were younger, we went to Roslyn Park Sevens. It's like a quite high-profile sevens thing, and we think year 7, year 8, and there was all the private schools there, and we won it. we just went to Brintig, just working class people. We're all mucking around and having a laugh. But it's interesting why we do put other nations on a pedestal before our own. I think we love to have that underdog mentality. But one thing I can't stand is when our own people sabotage our own people's success.
Yeah.
It really, like you just talked about it then, it really bothers me. I think for myself, going away to Australia for so long, just shifted my whole perspective. Like, you can win, I can win. And if I am going to yank on your chain, that's a direct reflection of what I'm really experiencing myself, like an internal dialogue, and it's an insecurity. Funny enough, it's just come into my head, I had a client today I was talking with, and he was sitting where you were sitting, and he goes, I just have to let you know, I was in the gym yesterday, and some guy asked me about you, working with you, and I said, yeah. And he was like, oh, have you heard some things about Ollie? And he's like, oh, what things? He's done nothing but amazing for me. I've had amazing transformations working with him for the last 3 months. And maybe if I wasn't resilient enough, I would take that personal. But I sat there when he said it to me, I was smiling. And what I've learned is people below you will only talk shit about you. No one above you is really going to yank on your chain, if you know what I mean, because they see the journey you've got to go through. And I think as a part of it, you've got to build that resilience. And you've got to be, take resilience from coaches or mentors. If they're going to make it hard for you, take that. But if it's Joe Bloggs that's just living his own life and he's talking shit, I just see it as like laughter now. But for some people out there, I know they've got better skill sets than myself, unbelievably gifted, but it's one person who's created this limiting belief on them that they can't go do the things they should do.
Yeah.
And it's really sad. And our people need to change that narrative. Like, we've got, like you just said, we've got some amazing people on our doorstep, amazing places to grow. Just stop talking shit about it.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? I think, like, negativity, I mean, most of the time it's totally pointless. And what people will say a lot is, it doesn't matter what those people think about you. It's very easy to say, isn't it? And very hard to not let it emotively or emotionally affect you. But the kind of way I've looked at it over life is, if that opinion doesn't come from like your inner circle, if it's not from your family or your very closest friends, then it's insignificant.
Yeah.
But in the same vein, we live in a social media world, and if you look at like the cesspit that is like X, and you see like the abuse that people get, it must be absolutely, to be a politician at the moment, it's insanity. Daily 4,000 or 5,000 comments about you, digging out every part of your personality, your family, what you look like, who you are. And it's the very worst bit for me of that kind of like of the social media age. And probably for a lot, one of the reasons why, like, as the climbing ramped up and a couple of sponsors, sort of came on board, it was one of the reasons that I said to the main sponsor, like, I don't want to sign this deal, because I don't want to be like as out there on social media as you want me to be, because one, I don't think it's my personality, but also two, like, I know that criticism would affect me. I think I'd find it very hard to deal with as much that people have. The internet and like the keyboard warriors can be quite cruel, can't they? Yeah.
I remember I went on loan from Leeds Rhinos to a team called York City Knights. They were in the championship and they weren't doing well. I was 17, so playing against men, one league below Super League, but they were the bottom enders of the championship. And it was my first game for them, and we were playing against a team called Keith Lee Cougars, and they were beating us. And I was standing to receive kickoff, and I just went, this guy in the stands going, "Fuck off back to Wales, you Welsh C-word." I was 17 and this fan, and then everyone else has called me a Welsh wanker, and I was like, I just had to, like, no one teaches you how to deal with that. You've got you know a couple of thousand fans in the audience, and they're just screaming at you, and you're like a 17-year-old. And you're like, how do you deal with that? But I just had to like smile it off. But it's just no one teaches you that fans are gonna. And I think about that with sports people. Obviously, like in your line of work, you know, you just spoke about it earlier. You've got to sign that dotted line on something or sign something off.
Yeah.
It's on you, and if it doesn't go well, it's that chain that follows down. How you've got to build some trust from the top guy to the bottom that hey, that's signed off correctly.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not your name that's going to get screwed. It's mine. And then if it does, how do we deal with that? You know?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think like when it comes to like whether it's criticism or like competitiveness and things like that, we still have to, you know, if you use like the school sports day now as an analogy for this, like everyone taking part, wonderful. Like you're, you know, for being there, that's, you know, it's brave. You know, you sort of giving it your best, that's brave. But people also have to realise that like not everyone wins, and ironically, of course, losing can be far greater in your journey than winning. What we've talked about today, less some issues on Everest. You know, largely it all seems like sunshine and rainbows, doesn't it? But it you know, it doesn't sort of cover those like the hard yards, the sort of the dark nights, the feeling of missing home, the long training sessions, the cold, the intensity and stuff. And so you have to be resilient, you know, sort of to get through that and keep going. And I've always thought, I think like loss always, when well dealt with, will always result in greater success. I've seen it so many times in both in the military and in athletes' careers, where if you deal with it well, you'll get stronger from it and you'll progress on further. The key bit, of course, is not allowing that loss or that brick wall at the time to then stop your journey and stop you progressing through. And for me, with my little one, it's that sort of the teaching of we can't always win, you know.
Yeah. I want to ask you as well, obviously when you're on tours and things like that, what was one of the experiences you had where you had to think on your feet, or it could have got really messy?
It's tough, really, because
it's probably multiple times
you've had
encounters, and I've kind of just thrown some out there because I just wanted to see what come to the surface. Or
I think like the biggest, if I talk about like effect as opposed to thinking on your feet, the realization that you're there is you know, is quite intimidating. It's a bit of shock on the senses. When I've served overseas, it's always been what we would call counterinsurgency operations. So that's where there's a threat within, you know, the society writ large. So, you know, it's not kind of like this nation's army against this nation's army. It is, there's a terrorist organization and they're embedded within this country or this place, and then you're there to counter that. And the greatest challenge above all is the complexity as to how you can do that without losing the support of the local people, without damaging them or their lives. And the fact that, ironically, of course, you know, you look different, you're from a different country, and albeit that, you know, the local people may not agree with the insurgents, they're from there, and they look like them. So it's always a difficult one. So I think like the challenge is, you know, sort of like daily, but it's keeping a sort of level mind, not allowing yourself to overstep the task you're there for. But I think like humility and kindness, you know, would always win that. There's certainly the population, and yeah, I think it's just hard to see. I think if I sort of like generalize this, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a war zone. We've talked a lot about South Wales and the sort of like the areas we grew up in. South Wales is a really good place, and like the facilities are good, the infrastructure's good, the people are good, the government's good. You know, it's all like, okay, you may have like a singular issue with one of those, but in like world terms, it's pretty fair, it's pretty balanced. You've got loads of access to stuff. My stomach's rumbling. I've also missed lunch. I wish that you could just like pick the population up and just like dump them in one of these countries for like a week and just be like, right, I tell you what, South Wales, you're in Kathmandu, Nepal for the next week. Pick them back up, bring them back here and realise it's like, oh shit, everything works. Yeah. We have healthcare. You have the ability to like seek help for different things. You've got free education. You can drive down the street and guess what? There's not like a cow coming one way, a truck on the other side of the road, and like somebody, you know, sort of like parked in the middle of it. We focus too internally on criticizing, but like in a global stage, the thing I've realized more than anything is that like it's not bad. Like we've got it pretty sweet.
I think everyone needs that perspective shift. I think everyone needs to go do something, like go away for a week in a really hard country, get humbled, come back, and you probably kiss the floor after it, you know, and just realize, hey, we got it pretty good here. I love where I live. I love my area of South Wales. I love living by the sea. You know, like you came down for a dip. I don't know, like some people say, oh, this is shithole. I'm like, nah, it's like, I say to people, it's the life that you live through your own lens is what's the shithole. Because we all have different experiences every day. It's just how you want to live it. And it does. I think people need to go do, you can't just say to them, go do a tour. Because it's not for everyone, but they need to do it in the sense of to just really like be grateful for things.
Yeah.
So it's needed. It really is needed. What did you learn? I know we did that. I did that talk for the people on the stage, and I'm really grateful for you two, you and Andy, organising that and bringing myself on. It really meant a lot. I was really humbled. I was really humbled because I'm sitting there talking in front of these military people, thinking I've got to tell a little bit about myself and how do I connect to these people that I'm a, you know, what do you call them? Civilian?
The civilian, yeah.
Hey everyone, it's Ollie Olds here with a quick word from our incredible sponsor, Pitch Roofer. You know, your home is your castle, and nothing protects that castle better than a solid, reliable roof. That's where Pitch Roofer comes in. They're not just building roofs, they're building trust, community, and peace of mind. Pitch Roofer has been serving our local community for years, and what really sets them apart is their commitment to giving back. From supporting local sport teams to donating to charities. They're making a real difference beyond roofing. Together, we are stronger. Now, if your roof is looking a little worse for wear, or you are thinking it might be time for a full replacement, Pitch Roofer has got you covered with top quality solutions tailored to protect your home and boost that curb appeal. Why should you choose Pitch Roofer? Let me break it down for you. Experienced professionals. These guys know this stuff with years of expertise in residential roofing. Affordable rates, competitive pricing with no hidden costs, high quality materials, durable weather resistant products that stand the test of time. Free inspections, get the condition of your roof checked at no cost. 100% satisfaction guaranteed. They're not happy until you are. So whether it's a repair, a replacement, or you just want a peace of mind your roof is in good conditions, give Pitch Roofer a call on 01656 470016, a text message to 07540 443345, or email gerald@pitchroofer.co.uk. Pitch Roofer, building more than roofs, building a stronger community. Now, back to the show.
I want to talk about a few topics now. I thought let's get into the crux of things that people might struggle with in the military that it's not really talked about. And I don't want to make this personal about you, but you could probably relate to a lot of it. And I wanted to do that when I did that talk the other day. It was be relatable to everyone else, but understand like the fall off. For instance, some people get their careers ended short. That might be the same as the military, and it's that identity, who we are. Like some people have achieved some amazing things, and then they get back into the real world and they're like, oh, hang on, no one actually gives a crap as much about me right now. How do you find, from your experiences with people you speak to, how do you find that transition?
Yeah, so I think like you can break it down into a couple of steps. I think the first one is getting across the line and joining, and just taking that step. For some people, that's like a supported push, and for other people, that's like an unsupported pull, depending on, where they're from in society. Some people will be really supportive and will, like, my mum, she literally drove me there. Maybe it was like, thank God.
Get the fuck out of here.
I've got rid of him. Yeah, but for others, it's hard because they, people maybe don't want them to go, or they give them bad advice. So once you're there, the biggest step is, just stay. Just stay for that, a bit like this sporting analogy earlier. Stick it out for 6 weeks and then sort of think, is this for me? By which point, of course, most people will be like, yeah, this is great. Now, some people, they don't want to be away from home. They don't want to go through the arduous training and will fall by the wayside. But as long as you've got past the initial part of basic training, you can make that decision for yourself. Thereafter, I would describe like the first sort of 4-5 years as a bit like the early stages of an elite sporting career, or sort of the experience of going to university, where it goes by in a flash. For most people at that stage, they've got no worries. They're not thinking about so the big wide world or the structure of life. But then the next stage is then deciding whether it becomes your career or not. And now, of course, you can exit. For most people, you can exit at any point. It's a year's notice from the military, as long as you served a minimum period of time, and you can dive out. But that can be a lot harder, I think, than people realise. And I've seen people do extremely well, leave the military and make an incredible life for themselves. There's nothing connected to it. But I've seen lots of people have regret, and maybe regret, because they didn't exploit it enough. They didn't get as many opportunities out of it that they could have. And so for me, I've always used like quite a simple metric on it, which is a bit like sport. Like, I will stay until I stop enjoying it. And 15 years later, that still seems to be the case in one shape or form. But of course, now for me, there's a reality that you're 35 years old, and the only job you've ever had, or proper job you've ever had, has been in the armed forces. So when you leave eventually, and we will all leave eventually, that needs to transition across to something else. I think the military sometimes gets a bad name in how it supports people on the way out. But writ large, like the package, the resettlement package on the way out is exceptional. The ability to educate, upskill, and better yourself whilst in is also exceptional. But again, like all of these things that exist in normal society as well as in the military, they can only be a benefit if you've taken them or worked to them, or that when you get out that you engage in the resettlement package, that you aim for a career within the area you've resettled into. It's just too easy to turn around and blame it and say, well, it's the army's fault that I haven't got a job at the end of it. the army does quite a lot to enable that.
That's really good. On the other end of that now, I want to ask is what is the average recruitment, like percentage-wise now? I heard a rumor that it's dropped over the years. Is that true, or is that not?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics, and I wouldn't want to give false information, but it's certainly not as high as it's been in the past. Obviously, the army's a lot smaller than it was in the past, but you get far less, or I think noticeably get far less youngsters wanting to do it. Certainly out of school, like the 16-year-old kind of like boy recruits, or female recruits, and heading off into any of the sort of regiments of the army. And I think it's a bit of misunderstanding as to what the army offers. You know, there's some like blunt facts, which is you can join the army now, and as a recruit you can go to training and the pay is like £25,000 a year. And guess what? As soon as you finish training, you can do as much sport as you like. You can have all these amazing adventures. You can develop yourself. But the key thing that's changed isn't the package. I think it's our willingness as a society or people to pack your bags, walk up to the train station, jump on a train and tell everyone you're going to see them in 10 weeks or in 15 weeks when training ends and go home. And I get frustrated when people think that the generation now are not as tough as previous generations. I think they are as tough. I think human beings will always be as tough deep down. But I think at the surface, it's softer. And so to get the same people through who will produce the same excellence in soldiering as the generations past, it's just harder, I think, to get them over the start line. Once they're over the start line, they will progress at the same pace. And they live in a world now where, arguably, to be the best 30 years ago was a lot simpler a game. There was less technology. All of the advancements of kind of like modern warfare, they just weren't there. The threat may have been like the other human, 400 meters away, and an armored vehicle dug in 1,000 meters away. Whereas the threat now is like, we've got that, we've still got that. Oh, by the way, there's drones overhead. There's drones way up, loitering. All of your technology is like a beacon that's giving off your position potentially. So it's a lot more complex, and so we need the same people, tough, resilient, whatever. But we also need them to be as technologically savvy as we'd expect in any other career.
So it's a lot though, because you're kind of looking at two skill sets there as well.
Yeah,
you've got physical.
Yeah,
and you've got like the knowledge base end to be able to be technology savvy, and maybe the older generation have not got that technology savvy.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
but the youngsters have got it. So how do we harness that and bring that into it?
I think they've got it. I think I don't know what the phrase is, but we're like the in between, aren't we? Where we grew up with nascent technology, and it's developed, we've become adults, and it's fed into our lives now. Our parents, grandparents are on the learning scale that way, which is dangerous. Yeah, like really dangerous.
Some people shouldn't have Facebook though. My dad shouldn't have Facebook. Some of the things
I could think of a few characters, but oh no, for 16-year-olds now, like they've got it. It's been part of their life since the start.
They pop out with a phone in their hand now.
Yeah. So, I don't think we have to worry about that. I think it offers something different, the military. And when you look at kind of like the adult life, the fact that bluntly most of us are going to work until well past 70, you don't have to have a career in the military. But if there's something itching, is the little scratch that, you know, is like, how do I get after this? Just do it. Just do it for 4 years. You know, it's a bit like, you know, we talked earlier, it's the same with the sporting thing. Like, if you want to try it, just try it for 4 years, because guess what? In 4 years' time, you'll probably come back to the same job, and guess what? The same people around you will still be in the same job. Yeah. And I was chatting to a lovely youngster the other day, and he's just finished university. He's taken a job in London and lives in like a shared flat, young professional. And he was like, yeah, my fear is if I join the army now, you know, what am I going to come back to? You know, if I do 4 years. I was like, exactly the same thing.
Nothing changes, man.
Like, one of them may have a promotion, the flat may look a bit nicer, and, you know, somebody's upgraded their car. But don't ever fear that.
Yeah.
Like, and where he'll come back is he'll come back with a different set of skills. You know, he may even decide to not go back into the same career he was in before. But I just think, just don't ever fear that. You know, just, again, try and pull yourself back to paddling in your own canoe, and just realise that it doesn't matter. You know, if that means that you've got a different path, fine. But it's trying to step out of when I say the nice pressure of friends. We all know friends who are like wonderful, beautiful people, but they stifle the progress of others because of their own like comfort mechanisms. You know, it's like, oh mate, don't leave, you know, don't go and do this. We're like, the team's in a good place, the rugby team's in a good place. We've just like, we're having a, you know, we've signed an agreement for a flat share next year, all that kind of stuff. It's just like, ignore that. There are points where you've got to be ruthlessly selfish to what you want to get after, you know, and that doesn't have to come of being like a bad person. No. But if you want to succeed at something, you have to have a level of selfishness. Yeah. And that's, maybe it's like, no, we're not going like partying at the weekend, all the way through to, no, I don't think this situation is right for me. I'm going the other way.
I like that a lot, and I resonate with that a lot. I think growth is massive, and you've got to realize sometimes that your closest friends are doing it innocently. They are pulling you back, like you just said. And it's having that awareness, isn't it? And I think it's being mindful of the like you spoke about earlier, is that who's your inner circle, and who's pushing you on, and who's like kind of holding you back, and even yourself. Are you pushing people on, or are you holding people back?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I suppose with that then, like, when it comes to, you know, growth, where was like a pivotal moment for you in your career? You've gone, well, that part there, it might not have been massive to anyone else, it was massive to me, and it really changed my trajectory.
Yeah, I think without going back to Everest, it was kind of like the first time I was on Everest. I got back I was 29 years old, and it was the first time in my life that I thought, actually, like, I'm pretty like comfortable with the skin I'm in, and like the person I am. And I think lots of that was, you know, because you'd had this like accelerated journey, doing loads of stuff to the point of entering the military, to then like finding your confidence, your home in the military, and you obviously have to like, you have to like live up to expectation, and for me that was quite hard initially. Like, I finished Sandhurst really young, and I suppose a bit of luck and skill, but I finished the course on top, and what that means is, so you get graded like 1 to 250, and I finished first, and you get presented with a thing called the Sword of Honor, and it's like it's a unique and like unbelievable experience. But it's like coming out of like an academy as like the best rated player, then the pressure thereafter into like the senior sports, so going from Sandhurst, which is training, into the real field army, was a really tough challenge. And of course, every time something went wrong, people would be like, oh, I'd expect better from you. You won the Sword of Honor. You should be better than this. And I think, like, hang on a sec, it's just like a minor mistake. Everyone else has made them here. But I allowed that to, like, those types of moments to put, like, loads of pressure on. And so I kind of, although I lived as me and I was kind of, like, doing life as me, I feel like there were loads of component parts of it that I was shaping my existence to, like, the expectation around. And I got back from Everest in 2019. I was like, nah, this is me. Like, I know who I am and I'm comfortable in it. And I think this is something that's misunderstood a little bit, where I think we expect people that by the time they're 18 to be like their own person.
It's a man there.
Yeah. And you could argue on this, on this sliding scale, that there are people who are in their 70s and have never truly been, like, comfortable in, their own skin. And it's like little basics, and it's much easier for us as men than it is for women. And that's been a whole journey of self-discovery, sort of with my partner, as to, like, the pressure the society puts on people to, like, dress a certain way, look a certain way, the fear that men have never had, as we sit here in t-shirts we've worn before, as to, like, I can't be seen in that dress because I wore it before. And so all of these little things make it much harder for people to be like, nah, this is me and I'm comfortable, and kind of, like, accept it or leave. I used to have the sticker mountain biking, like, it's probably about 2003, and the magazines used to come with stickers, and you'd sort of, like, put them all over your helmets and stuff. And it said something like, if your friends aren't into mountain biking, get some new fucking friends. and these, whether it be sport, the military, like, you do gain amazing friends, and that doesn't take away from your school friends. But you must, like, balance kind of who you spend time with against what they are, for you and for them in, like, positivity. I've got some, like, unbelievably brilliant friends from school, but they're also friends that you grow out of for each other, and that's not a criticism of them, but just because you were pals at, like, 9, it doesn't mean at 35 you're going to understand each other and be positive for each other. And so it's being comfortable in that kind of evolution. But there are ones that'll go all the way through.
Oh, definitely. I that resonates with me a lot, and it's something that I really speak about, is that being comfortable in yourself, and I say alignment. It's like, and I'm talking about it in a, even I'll reflect back to sports days of, you essentially, like, I've looked at myself as you essentially put a mask on at stages, like a mask of, right, I've got to perform here in order to get in that squad. And I knew I wasn't the best player, so I really had to push. But what happens when you can push? Like you just said, you put all this pressure on yourself, and you can't switch off, and you're on all the time. And it's, for myself, like you just said, then there's that becoming comfortable in who I am, being okay with not being correct all the time for me, and learning to be more comfortable with myself. That's a journey, I think. And like you just said, there's 70-year-olds out there that still can't sit in that, and they perform or they act up, and that's a self-discovery thing for myself that has grown more and more. And I think, I haven't got children, but I bet even having a kid, man, it makes you peel another layer off and makes you realize what's really important. That little fella there, or is it a boy or girl?
Little boy.
Little boy. That little fella there, that's all I really care about. Right? He's going to get the most authentic version of me, and I think, for me, it's been a big one, and realizing, okay, and I know we all know we have certain types of friends too, school friends. You have, you've got the social friends, the work friends, your if you're sporting friends, whatever it is, and it's being able to then like kind of sit back with me, and that's been a journey. Just for myself, I reckon, from the day I fully checked out. I don't count rugby now as rugby to see as a social, but I switched off, and I don't know if that's something that you can sit with and like get as well.
Yeah, and I mean, the little one, he for me has changed a lot in terms of like the person that you want to be for him. That sort of, what's your sort of personal legacy, but in reality, how do you create a sort of structure, a support mechanism and stuff for him? But sort of talking to your earlier point, being ruthless with yourself, that when you spend time together, that you don't allow the other pressures to overshadow that time, so that you're distant from those moments, those sort of core memories for him, because you're too busy taking a phone call, or your head's just not in it, so he's watching the iPad or whatever. And so we've sort of gone like back to basics, and do just like the simple things, and I kind of use it, of course, for my own sanity in it all, of finding those moments then to like truly switch off. And I think if you don't, so pressure of life, if you let it build, the first things that drop are all of the like the good basic things that you need to perform. So your training gets thrown out because, so say you use like working long hours as an example. You're in the office all day, so you're exhausted. You then drive home and think, I'll just miss training. I'll go home. Over time, you throw out your own sort of nutrition, your training, your enjoyment of stuff. And so you have to keep like that balance. And it is difficult. Like the more, the more successful that people become, the more that other people need them. If it's in a business sense, that need their time, need their energy, everything. But the best leaders have like a ruthless ability to say, well, actually, no, for instance, like until 8:30 in the morning is like protected time. I am training, and like I'm not taking a phone call until 8:30, and at like 3 p.m. on a Friday, I'm leaving because I'm doing the school run. And it's like, it's working out like what are your non-negotiables to it all, because for all of like this sort of like this success, if you look at like finance in business, and like the people who are seen to be the most successful there, so few of them are like enjoying that journey. I worked for a really, really powerful officer a long time ago, long left the military now, and he, I worked directly to him for like 6 months. It was basically, to all intents and purposes, I was like his PA. At one point, I was like doing his laundry for him and all sorts. It was like it was pretty gritty. And he came in one night. It was like super late. And he said, right, we need to go to a bar. We were in the States at the time. And it was like really out of character for him. And went to this bar, and I was like barely 21. So he ordered these 2 massive like margarita bowls. I don't know if you can picture them. Big straw. It's like brightly coloured, hideous like drink. And he absolutely nails it. And he nails another one and stuff. And then eventually, like, the truth serum took effect, and he was like, I've just been told that this is like my last job, in the army. I won't like say exactly what his position was, because I wouldn't want people making the connections, but he was super high. And their contracts only run for a rolling year at that point, because you can imagine they're so
Yeah.
senior. It's like executive positions in the city, and they'd said to him that, you know, you've done a fine job, but it's over. And he sort of broke down in front of me, and he was like, I realised when that phone call ended, when I sat there in silence for 10 minutes, that I spent 25 years like doing what was expected of me, you know, doing the job that people would say, oh, that's the job that is like reported on best. That's the job that's the most likely to promote from. And so he had this like what looked like an illustrious career all the way through, you know, it had like a serious pace. And then it ended, and he said to me, like, I haven't enjoyed it, because all I've done is like burn the midnight oil, and I took the office jobs over the like in the field fun jobs, because I knew the office job would get me promoted a year before this one. I then did this job because it was in the most powerful place in the centre of London, as opposed to the one I wanted to enjoy with the family in the countryside. And what had happened, of course, is he hadn't enjoyed any of the ride. And of course, you know, other component parts of his life had fallen down on that journey. And it was quite a powerful thing to go through young. And I'm not saying like I've made like a million billion mistakes along the journey, and I've allowed my career and my interests to sort of overshadow personal relationships and like your ability to do everything. But fuck me, if you don't enjoy the journey, there's no point.
What's the point
doing it? So
that's so true.
I always kind of think of him as that, like, you know, bless him, as the example as to just take the job that you want to do. Don't do the job that after 1 year you'll get a little sort of like extra tick on the promotion ladder,
Yeah.
you know.
I love that. And it's like that saying in it, you know, if you love carpentry or you love building things, but that other job over there, like you just said, is quicker or pays a little bit better, but you're gonna be miserable, like, do the carpentry.
Yeah.
If it means a lot to you, do the carpentry. If stacking shelves,
Yeah.
you love that, go stack shelves.
Yeah.
But I love that story, man, and yeah, I wonder what that guy's doing now.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't move in the same circles.
Oh, Geth, it's been an absolute pleasure, man.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
I'm grateful for you to share the stories, the summits, Everest. I'm grateful for you to touch in on the military life. But more importantly, man, I'm grateful for you. You're a top bloke.
Thanks, mate.
I mean,
That's kind, yeah.
yeah, and look forward to get to know you more. Grab them coffees, come for sea dips.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited, mate. And even my brain off the top of this is just thinking, how can I connect with you and do something like the hikes and stuff, and connect men to doing this stuff and getting uncomfortable. I'd love to touch base on some of that. So
Yeah, we should.
yeah, man, love it.
Get outside.
Yeah, what are you grateful for?
My boy. Just having had all of these opportunities.
Yeah.
And just, I actually, I'll say it in a more, in a less quick fire fashion. One of the most important people in my life. I was saying something. I got asked a question. When you do, when you sort of plan out your life, and you can do this with anyone, and the end part of it was like, write your own obituary. What do you want your obituary to say? And most blokes will put like, did this, played rugby here for 2 years, had 10 caps, X, Y, Z. It's quite like methodical, statistical, but it's not, you're sort of like missing the meaning of it. And my partner, who, I hope she wouldn't mind me saying this, I sort of said, what do you want yours to say? And she just said, she was loved. And I thought, like, well, mine looks like shit.
That's so nice.
But yeah, it's really, so I think like
Shows
just grateful for the people and experiences around. Yeah.
That's a nice one, isn't it? That hits home for me then, because you have your accolades and your achievements, but like really under that, what do we really want? Just want to be loved,
Yeah.
you know? What's her name?
Al.
Thank you, Al.
Yeah, thanks, Al.
Okay, thank you so much, brother.
Yeah, nice one, mate.